So in this video here, we're talking to Marcus. He works for a government agency in the US, and we're right down at the decision point, and I'm trying to unpack what were the important criteria for him. He's chosen KPMG, and then we're going to have a look at who came second and why they came second.
And can you remember why, who came second?
Accenture came second.
Okay.
And the primary reason for that is I think it was more around timing. You know, they wouldn't have been able to get to it as soon.
Okay.
So that was part of the reason that they were second.
So you signed this July, August, and they came in August, September.
Correct. Yeah.
What was Accenture saying? They couldn't get around to it until the next year, or like how much of the timing did we have?
It was toward the end of the year.
Okay. So you're going to wait?
Yeah, like 3 months later. And we just didn't really have much of an appetite for it. We're like, hey, listen, let's just get this thing started. And it's not like KPMG wasn't qualified. I think what kind of put them over the top is they were able to start immediately. And so that kind of worked out better for what we were trying to do at the time.
So in this case, his decision is, I need it now. But let's have a look, see, is price important as part of this decision?
Was there a difference in price?
Pricing was pretty similar.
Okay.
There was maybe a difference of like 10 or 15 grand.
Okay. Which was KPMG more expensive or less?
They were a little less expensive.
Okay.
But it was like a negligible amount. I mean, it was less than 10%. So.
Okay, but this didn't factor in. It's like whatever.
Yeah.
They can start faster, so if they were 10% more expensive, would we go with the one that goes fast?
So as you can see there, one real important thing for him was, are they available now? We've gone through this selection process. It's been sort of May. They kicked it off. They've gotten it through. People are in agreement we need to do it. And so as a result, he moves for the company that's available right now. Now, before we move off this decision, were there any other players in the mix there? Because we've looked at the top two, but what about the also-rans? Why did they get rejected? What was wrong with their bids?
What about the other two? You're like the mid-tier Grant Thornton type in the minority-owned business. Why did you reject them?
The qualifications weren't as strong as we would have liked. I think just wasn't as strong. They've done quite a bit of those assessments with commercial clients, but not as many in the public sector. And we wanted to see more public sector representation, but
okay.
Decent qualifications and good body of work. But that kind of tipped the scales for us.
Okay, so this is going back to you saying, I want to know, what type of work and with who. And so you've done the type of work, but you've done it with a commercial entity, and I want to see benchmarking against another kind of government agency. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. You move forward to this. So was this an easy decision? Like how did anybody fight to have another choice, or was it just like a kind of push of the domino and they all just fall over?
It was more of the latter. I mean, it wasn't super easy, but there were no dissenters, right? I think most folks were generally on board. I suspect the folks that weren't fully in love with it probably just maybe realized it wasn't worth it because kind of the majority ruled. But we didn't really get any pushback. I mean, it's something that we needed to do, and I think everybody generally got. If you kind of take a step back and think about it, that this poor performance, the operational metrics that were kind of below the thresholds in our risk appetite ultimately would sort of grow into other issues. I think people generally understood that, and we don't want to be impacting the mission organization. So it was a relatively easy decision, I would say. Not the easiest I've seen, but it was relatively easy.
Okay, that makes sense. You mentioned that obviously Accenture lost out because they couldn't put people in until the end of the year. So I think you said about May time you've started having the conversations, and it looks like July, August, so you go through all the process, RFPs, presumably meeting vendors. Why then? Why did you have to go and fix it immediately? Why couldn't you wait?
Yeah, we got the sense, as I mentioned, we had gotten the sense that if we allowed this to persist, I think we would be dealing with maybe bigger problems, right? That was kind of the general sentiment. Like we can't let this continue to go on. And as you know, once you start to have these conversations, because there's socialization, there's vetting, there's the RFP, there's just a long tail on this stuff, right? So like we started talking about it in May as a group, and we didn't get like an executed SOW until August. And that was relatively quick, I guess. I mean, I've seen these things drag out for 6 to 9 months. I mean, we're working on something else right now, and we've been working on it for close to a year, and we still haven't even gone out with the RFP. So these things, obviously, this is a little bit different because it's the dollar value for this particular engagement is much, much larger, but you just know that there's a tail. So it's like the longer that you wait, you're in for several months to begin with. So it's like, let's just start the clock now.
Okay. And I think you mentioned this was in the budget, the 150,000. When does it get in the budget? Because it sounds like you've gone May to August. Was this money that was sat in a pot that you could have used for this anyway, and it just got spent on this consultant engagement? Or
correct? Yeah. So there's typically like funds that we set aside for third party spend, right? It's not tagged. It's not always tagged to a specific project or initiative, but there is some funds set aside for these types of things.
So every year we'll have to solve a problem. We just don't know what the problem is.
Correct.
So let's put a pot of money aside, and then when we bump into a problem, we'll draw out of that.
That's exactly right. So if it's just easier from like a budget and like financial perspective to kind of care for those types of things, and it's not a large sum of money. It's maybe a couple $1 million that the entire agency can kind of draw down, but if you don't do that, then for every little thing, you have to go through the process of like an unbudgeted funds request, right? It doesn't make sense. So we just keep the money on hand so that when something comes up, and it always does, you just have some money that you can draw on.
So digging in there, we're trying to look and say, why now? What is it about this I've got to buy now? And it was really just the dominoes have fallen. We've started a process, we've finished a process. There's no pushback from anybody on whether we should do this. Even the people who disagree, they can't be bothered to push back on it. So the sort of train's in motion, and it's going to leave the station. In terms of the budget, it was money that was sat there. It's not something they've had to advocate for. It's just a case of spending this and choosing to spend their money on this rather than on perhaps some other consulting they might need. Now we're going to dive in and look and say, well, is he worried about anything? And what is he hoping for when he makes this decision?
Okay, that makes sense. So you get to August, you get that signed SOW. Sounds like you've pushed through this process. What are you hoping for?
I'm hoping for the organization being the third party to be everything that we expected them to be throughout the sort of RFP process, right? Like they showed up really well. Their pitch was really good. The pricing was about what we expected it to be. They appear to be very well qualified. The individuals who they will have on the project know this work. They're skilled, they're experienced. So just want our pre-onboarding experience to match what actually shows up. That's kind of first and foremost.
This is pretty mechanical at this point in time. It's like, I've gone through an RFP. You said you could do this. You promised me these people. I want what I paid for.
Correct.
Okay. Flip that around. Were you worried about anything? Was there any risk in pushing forward with this at that point in time?
There's always risk. I think you can minimize the risk a little bit through the RFP process. Like if you're very clear with what you want, and you ask the appropriate questions. And then I think you can also mitigate the risk by going with a larger firm. I think with the smaller firms that may not be as well known, you're exposed to a little bit more risk there. But these larger firms, I mean, they have a reputation, right? And I worked for one of them, so you kind of know how they approach these things and how they look at them. So not to say that nothing could go wrong, but there are things that you can do to kind of mitigate the risk. So yeah, there is some level of concern, but then on our side of it, we just need to make sure that we are managing them appropriately.
So there you have it. This isn't really a major decision for us. It's something that we have experience doing, and I've worked for these companies, so I'm happy to accept that a Big Four kind of company can deliver this kind of project. And in fact, when you look at these things, sometimes it is just ticking a box or kicking a goal. And those things are low energy for many, many companies. They just, this is stuff that we have to do, so let's just get it done. Cheers.